Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to a brand new video here today, and welcome to an announcement video and intro to my F1 2019 podcast plans for the year. If you guys have been around on my channel for at least a year or so, you'll know that I run a podcast every single year called the Pitlane podcast that started back on, I think it was F1 2015 now, or just the start of 2016, I think. So it's now in its fourth season, fourth year, essentially. I do it with two of my friends, Callum and Tom. Tom, wwho you might know, Tom97HD, who still makes F1 gaming videos, and Callum, who used to make gaming videos, doesn't anymore, but he still does the podcast. And obviously us three, we've known each other for many, many years. We actually met over playing the F1 game, and so all three of us love to kind of, watch the races through and then kind of discuss them together on the podcast for now, what has been 4 years, including this one now, starting now. So this video is just to kind of announce some of the new plans we have for this year, and also just intro some of those and explain the kind of, reasoning behind it, essentially, and just to announce that the podcast will be beginning now from tomorrow. So the very first podcast of the year, episode 107, I believe, will be posted tomorrow, talking about, testing week one, and also kind of any kind of maybe news we missed over the winter, and just generally how all the teams separately are kind of looking like, with their new car launches, and then just throughout the testing one kind of development. And then as we've done from there, we'll kind of go with a weekly podcast up until the first race, the Australian Grand Prix, and that's where some of the plans kind of change a little bit. We've shaken things up to kind of keep things fresh on their toes for this year. But before we get to that, another big announcement I want to make is now that we're on Spotify as well. After so many of you guys asking if we could put the podcast also on Spotify, because you use that a lot for your music and whatnot, we've now also put it on Spotify, as well as we already had it on Soundcloud and iTunes. So you now have 3 different platforms that you can listen to audibly the podcast to on the go on your mobile phone. So SoundCloud, iTunes, and Spotify. Literally just search up the Pitlane podcast, the Pitlane podcast, and you should find it over on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Spotify. I'll put all the links in the description below, or I'll pin it to like a top comment as well and give you all the links, so you can just directly go to it, maybe off your phone if you're watching it on a mobile device, and you can get, followed basically on all 3 platforms, and so you can get kind of, updates straight away, push notifications on when a new episode goes out, essentially, and you can listen to us on the go, because I know obviously I am an avid podcast listener, and I love to listen to the podcasts that I listen to on the go all the time, especially in London on the tube where there's no signal. It's great to kind of download the podcast on the app. For me, it'll be iTunes, but for some of you guys on Android, it might be a lot easier to have it on Spotify or SoundCloud. I gotta say, the audio has been really solid, actually. There's been like a consistent over 2,000 listeners on SoundCloud on every episode we put out, which is really solid considering we don't really, advertise the SoundCloud or, really any of the audio sites too much. We have a little bit of a, 1 second, say of it on every episode that we are available in audio, but apart from that, we don't really push it too much. Obviously, we push the YouTube video a bit more because it's on my channel, but yeah, really solid 2,000 listeners. So thank you very much to if any of you guys out there are one of those 2,000 listeners that listen to us on SoundCloud, or obviously the few hundred on iTunes as well, and maybe hopefully a few more on Spotify now as well. I know that's definitely an easier way maybe for some people to do it, because if you listen to your music, it's easier to listen to a podcast on there as well. So that's the kind of first big announcement for the plans for 2019. We're on Spotify now, the new kind of platform we've got it on for audio. The second announcement is the kind of different arrangement and order we'll be doing for like videos, and the structuring, I guess, is the word I'm trying to find, is for the videos. So last year, in order to make sure we could boost the quality of the podcast in terms of the actual video quality, we delayed every podcast by 1 day. So even when there was a race on Sunday, we'd do a podcast on the Monday, so the day after, and the same thing for off race week podcasts. We'd also put those out on Monday because it just seemed easier. Sometimes it was Tuesday, sometimes you just have delays in a week, but generally we try to aim for Monday, and I was trying to boost the quality basically, because at the time, Tom and Cal did not have good enough internet to maybe upload it straight away on a Sunday and get the podcast out in time for a good reaction on Sunday evening. So we moved it to Monday, but over the year, speaking very honestly to you guys, over the year, the podcast, the last season we did, season 3 of podcast, the reaction back, the number of views we're getting per episode, and just generally even the kind of reactions and the comments and stuff, we're just getting a little bit lower than we had in previous seasons. And obviously a lot of that, it can be, in part due to F1 themselves doing a lot of content now on real life F1. So I'm literally going up against the actual sport that I'm making a video of in terms of content as well. And also there's just a lot more places that offer content on F1 IRL stuff like that. And also YouTube itself has changed massively, the algorithms and whatnot for search engines, and the way that you guys see the videos. I'm sure not a lot of you guys even see the videos in your sub boxes at this point. All you don't get notified them if you have notifications on. So that is definitely the best way to get notified for a video, by the way, guys. If you turn on notifications, you'll never miss an upload of anything on my channel. But yeah, it's generally in the last year, the podcast just a little bit lower than we were wanting for the entire year. So to try and shake things up, because if you're not really changing or moving forward, you're kind of going backwards. So we thought we'd freshen things up a little bit. So we've got 3 different categories now of kind of podcasts, essentially, that we're going to be putting out, or shows in a way that we're going to be putting out, essentially. So we've got number 1, an instant race reaction video or show, if you will. So every time there is a race, it's a race weekend, on the Sunday, me, Tom, and Cal will hop on straight away as soon as the guys start getting on the podium, because they've stopped doing interviews on the podium now. They do it before the podium. So as soon as the podium commences, we'll hop on and we'll do a short and sweet, I'm thinking maybe maximum 20 minutes at best. Very quick, to the point, succinct race reaction. Me, Cal, and Tom won't talk to each other at all until we get into that call and start recording the podcast. So it'll be the genuine race reaction, basically, to that Grand Prix. So that'll be a small little mini video package of 20 minutes that will be put on the channel on the Sunday of the actual Grand Prix. So it'll be on the same day the race happened. You'll get an instant race reaction. I think the majority of people, unfortunately, a majority will just be only interested in kind of that. So that will hopefully kind of help us out a little bit in terms of the kind of reactions we're getting and the sort of just numbers we're getting in for that kind of episode. And then what we'll do is, on a race weekend, after that Sunday reaction video, on the Tuesday following that race, we'll then do an actual proper podcast, kind of a normal length, 35 minutes to 40 minutes, kind of there or thereabouts, and have an actual proper review of the podcast. So Sunday's more of a race reaction, and then Tuesday's more of a race review, where we can actually look at, the medium themselves, analysing, the pundits will give their, expertise, knowledge on what they thought of the race, and we can kind of digest that and kind of give our own thoughts and our own takes on it on Tuesday. And that'll be a bit more of a deep dive, basically, on that race compared to the very short, succinct race reaction on Sunday. And then when there's not a race on a weekend or a week, we'll try and aim to get a podcast out on a Sunday, because we did it on Mondays, but I think Monday's quite a bad day. Monday start the week, Monday blues. I feel like, people are going back to school or uni or work or whatever. I think Sunday is a better day to post a kind of longer podcast like that, especially on an off-race week, when there's, no racing action that week. I think, people will be able to relax on a Sunday and hopefully watch that podcast. So basically 3 different shows, if you will, but basically still one podcast, and then on top of that, a kind of race reaction, because the podcasts will still be numbered, from 107, 108, 109. In terms of the race reviews on Tuesdays will be a normal podcast episode. Let's say there's not a race the next week, that'll be a normal podcast episode, so the next numerical number. But the instant race reactions will not be included as an actual podcast. They'll literally just be a video that us 3 as an entity of a trio of the Pitlane podcast produce, essentially, if you will. If there is interest to maybe have that as audio, maybe let us know in the comments below. Let me know in the comments below, and maybe we could put that on. But I feel like it might be a little bit confusing, to be honest. I'd rather have the audio version just all be, actual podcasts of 35 minutes of length or above, and then have that instant reaction just as a kind of video we produce away from the actual podcast itself. I say 35 to 40 because we did a questionnaire over the winter break in around January. I posted a questionnaire on Twitter, and also I did it on YouTube on the community post, and quite a lot of you guys answered, like a few hundred, good few hundred of you guys answered, so thank you very much for that. And it seemed like the general gist was a good length for a podcast that seemed like for you guys that'd be interested were about 35 to 40 minutes kind of long. So I think we're going to aim for that. A little bit shorter than your kind of generic, normal podcast. Like podcasts I listen to sometimes go to 2 hours long or 1 hour, 40 minutes, but I totally understand for a sport, it's a little bit long-winded to talk about a sport for that long, honestly. Obviously, there's a difference between just talking about your lives on a podcast that you listen to compared to a sports podcast, which is maybe a bit more structured and a bit more kind of direct to the point of what you're talking about. So 35 minutes seem pretty okay. Finally, I want to give a little reminder that we are also on Patreon as a trio, as the Pitlane podcast. So if you guys especially listen to the podcast on audio a lot more than you do on YouTube, then hopefully it'll be kind of understandable. We don't really receive any kind of revenue from those listens, basically. It's, Spotify, iTunes, Soundcloud, all stream for free, basically. There are no adverts, and we don't actually have, at this point, any sponsors apart from GT Omega as an affiliate code. So if you do want to want to support us in that way, if you want like a desk chair or something like that, like a chair literally that I've got, then you can check out GT Omega and use the code PitlaneF1 to support the podcast that way. But if you have a spare literal dollar, then you can start supporting us for literally just $1, and that goes a long way, really, compared to any kind of thing you could do via listening to the podcast, or even if you're on YouTube as well and you just want to go that extra mile maybe and support us. If you like what we do, you can support us on Patreon for $1, and then also $5, which gives you like a few extra perks of like getting into a Discord server and stuff like getting into a kind of F1 fantasy league, which is just for the patrons at the moment. So over the last year, we had a good number of patrons, and it was really fun to kind of interact. You guys would give us kind of, articles or kind of, little tidbits that maybe would be worth, and sometimes we actually formed, there were a few instances where there was an off-race week podcast where me, Cal, and Tom honestly didn't know what to talk about for that week, and there'd be a topic that was put into the Discord server that was really helpful to kind of, as a big topic basically to talk about. So, and also at the same time, you guys can submit questions over that Discord and get involved in the podcast directly. So just a case in point, if you do enjoy the podcast, if you have done in the previous years and you have a spare, $1 or whatever like that, you can support us directly. It would go a long way to also help for equipment and stuff like that, because if you remember, Cal had a broken headset last year. He's fixed that now, but Raw's looking to maybe improve it, with better audio equipment, better lighting equipment, or, whatever the case, basically, and that all just goes towards the podcast, basically. So that's pretty much all the intro announcements I need to make for the 2019 version of the Pitlane podcast. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to it, and you can tune in tomorrow for the very first episode and tune in over the year. Obviously, it's a very enjoyable thing to make. I think, not a lot of F1 gaming channels do IRL content this much, compared to me in terms of actual talking about the sport we actually love, in terms of, the games based off it, but also, we'd like to actually talk about the real life sport. And we've been doing it now, like I said, for 4 years. Me, Cal, and Tom started in 2016, and we didn't think we'd be getting this far, honestly. I think at the time we thought it might be like a cool series, and I honestly thought maybe at the time, we might stop doing it after a year or two, but 4 years in, there's still plenty of interest from you guys, especially on Twitter and Instagram, asking where it is, and we still enjoy making it, and we actually still have a passion of trying to improve it where we can. Obviously, there are limitations compared to other people that do F1 podcasts. We cannot be in the same location. I live in London. Cal lives in a split between like Nottingham and kind of like around the Staffs uni area, and then Tom lives in Spain. So there's just no way we can do it in person and do like a live action studio. That would be the ultimate dream, but at the moment it's just not possible. We're just three kind of, young adults in three separate areas of the world, literally, trying to do a podcast like this. So it's, we try to do our best and try to improve as much as we can. So, but nonetheless, those of you who do tune in do enjoy what we try and do on it. So, yeah, guys, if you did enjoy and like the sound of that, or the, Spotify announcements and whatnot, then be sure to drop a like button. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments below for the year ahead of the podcast. If you've got any suggestions maybe for the future, possibly even any guests you might want to get along, because we're kind of looking to maybe bringing more guests on a bit more frequently, I think, especially on the off-race week podcast, kind of making an emphasis of, there's no race, so let's try and get a guest on. So any kind of burning guests you guys want us to try and get on, maybe obviously within reason of someone I could actually try and contact and get on the podcast, basically. But yeah, leave us suggestions in the comments below, and if you are new around here, then do get subscribed for that podcast I just mentioned. I don't know how you'd be new around here if you weren't subscribed and you watched this video somehow, but if you are, then do get subscribed, and I will see you guys next time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.